Welcome back to the thought share on schooling. After my video yesterday, several of my friends asked me some questions and further clarification. So I thought let me do that today itself while the topic is still fresh in your minds. I want to make a couple of basic statements which are self-evident, but I think it's important to state them. First and foremost is the knowledge today, by and large, has become a commodity. It's freely available. It's the entry barriers on the acquisition of knowledge have almost disappeared. For example, I could sit here, and I do this quite often. I could sit here and watch a live session of a professor in MIT teaching a course on physics. Even if I don't get a live session, I can definitely get a recording of that session. So it's as good as sitting in the class. Now, I'm a teacher myself. I know that watching a video is never as good as being in the presence of the teacher himself or herself. I make absolutely there's no doubt in my mind about that. However, this is the next best. And I am sitting here in India, MIT is in the United States. This sitting virtually in that class costs me nothing at all. All I need is broadband, I have a smartphone, or I have an iPad or some computer of some kind, and I am sitting in that class virtually, listening to that professor teaching that course in MIT in the US. That's broadly become the state of practically everything we know as knowledge. So what we therefore need to change quite desperately is the way we teach. Believe me, even the day it started, our teaching methodology, which is discrete pieces of information shoved into the brains of students without any understanding of how they relate to each other, even less understanding of how they apply in real life. And then the expectation is that they must memorize it and they must regurgitate it at the time of examinations, which is really what we call random recall within a specific time frame. And this we call passing or failing. And based on this, the future of the child is decided. How many of you have had this experience of one of your children, or maybe yourself when you were at school? In the exam, which was between 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m., there was this critical question. You knew the answer to this question, but it just wouldn't come. It was there, sitting at the tip of your tongue, sitting at the tip of your brain, but it just would not come forward. 10:30, you have handed in your paper. That question to which you knew the answer is blank because you didn't remember it between 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. You gave your paper, it's gone. You walk out of the examination hall and bling, it comes. So now, do you know it or you don't know it? But will you pass or will you fail? And on this is supposed to depend your future in the world. Because for all of us, most of us, education means completing school, going to college, from college going to university, from university doing a post-graduation, for some of us doing a PhD. Now, my submission to you is that this entire process is nonsense. First of all, measuring knowledge as random recall within a specific period of time is completely illogical. It does not prove that you have knowledge, it does not prove that you are ignorant. It proves nothing. All it proves is that you were able to recall some stuff within a specific time frame which has no sanctity by itself of any kind whatsoever. But this is what we have set for ourselves. So this thing needs to be scrapped. We need to teach in a way where what we teach makes sense in terms of application, number one. Number two, the different things we teach must be clear in terms of their relationship to one another. It must be clear how physics relates to chemistry, how chemistry relates to botany, how botany relates to geology, how geology relates to zoology, how zoology relates to geography, how the whole jing-bang lot relates to history, and so on and so forth. All of this is clear, all of this, if not everybody, certainly most people know, but we do not teach it this way. We teach discrete subjects which apparently have no relation to one another, and we do not teach how they apply in real life. This is what must go. And the reason, as I said, why we teach that is because we have set for ourselves this peculiar progression from school to college to university and so on and so forth. Now, my submission is two things. Firstly, this progression is completely ridiculous, it is completely unrealistic, it is completely unnecessary. There is no earthly reason why every child must go to university. No reason whatsoever. But we do that because we believe that that's the only way of getting a, within quotes, a good job. Our own experience today proves that those who have university degrees don't necessarily get good jobs, and those who get good jobs don't necessarily have university degrees. You've got companies like Google and Amazon, for example, who don't even ask for a university degree. But even more importantly, this has to be legitimized, and it has to become respectable. To say that my son, my daughter has not gone to university, they just finished school, and that is good enough because that's all the education they need in terms of academics. And also that their actual education, even in academics, does not necessarily end because formal schooling has ended. The school must therefore become a place where we teach them tools. The tools to acquire further academic knowledge if they wish, and tools to stand on their own feet if they wish. Therefore, as I said yesterday, education must be for 7 years only. After that, it must split into two streams. One is a stream of entrepreneurs, people who want to set up their own businesses, people who want to work with their hands, people who want to create jobs for others and for themselves, people who want to start earning from that age onwards. The second stream must be of people who are genuinely interested in further studies in a specific body of knowledge. They can go to university, they can go do PhDs, they can become research scholars and so on and so forth. What is important is that the earning capacity of both of these should remain the same. It is not that people who work with their hands, who are skilled in a particular vocational or in a particular hands-on thing, end up in an intra-dig kind of environment, and they end up earning less money than their within quotes hoity-toity university type colleagues and friends who go off to university. That must not happen. So a person may be a motor car mechanic, but that person must earn equal to a university professor of the same seniority, and this is eminently possible. Believe me, I'm not talking any rocket science. This is already happening in Europe, in Germany, in Sweden, in other places. This is already happening. There are people who work, for example, for BMW, who work for Mercedes, who work for other high engineering firms, who earn very, very good incomes working as mechanics. They haven't been to university, but they are experts in their line of work, and they do a phenomenal job, and they earn the same as or more than their university educated colleagues. This will also bring about a respect for each other and a genuine collaboration between academia and industry, which is again something which is lacking, which is something which is very, very important for us to do. So there must be a focus on creating entrepreneurship and a clarity with regard to the fact that somebody who wants to attend university is of course most welcome to attend it, and those doors must be open to them. So now, what must schooling teach? As I mentioned yesterday, three things. Number one is values. ethics, values, morals. Number two is numeracy and literacy, which are the tools to open the doors of learning lifelong. And number three is a vocational skill which they can practice, and this to be taken to a level where they can set up, it becomes a means of earning for them. They can set up a business with it, they can work on their own, or they can create a business in which they work, and they must be helped also with venture capital. Now, what therefore is the school giving them in a little more detail than that? I made some note for myself and I'm going to tell you. Number one, things which are critically important but we do not teach them in school. For example, we don't teach children, today we are talking about sex education, right, in village schools and so on and so forth. How come nobody talks about education with regard to good marriages? A marriage is not only sex. So when you're talking sex education, by all means, teach that if you like. But what is even more important than that is relationships. How to make good relationships and how to keep good relationships. Today, marriages are literally like whiskey on the rocks everywhere in the world, in all communities, all cultures. Why? Because we don't know how to maintain good relationships. So, schools must teach relationship building. Number two, schools must teach influencing skills. How to influence people, how to convince people. And this again relates to relationships, because in my experience, of my lifelong experience of living and my 35 years experience of teaching leadership, the most helpful people are the most influential. Helpful has to do with relationships, and the most helpful people are the most influential. My first boss, Nick Adams, used to say that treat a relationship like a bank account. He would say what you put in it is what you have when you need it. So put in it when you don't need it, so that you have it to withdraw when you need it. Goodwill is the commodity for this bank account. So make sure that you have a bank account which is full of goodwill that you can draw on when you need it. So influencing skills. Third one is conflict resolution skills. Teach them how to disagree without being disagreeable. This is one of our major problems across the world. We don't know how to disagree respectfully. We don't know how to disagree appreciatively with each other. So it's either me, or you are my friend or my enemy. There's no middle ground. So disagreement is taken as rebellion, as opposition. Whereas it is not opposition, it is not rebellion. Disagreement is disagreement. You have a point of view, I have a different point of view. You are entitled to your point of view, I am entitled to my point of view. And we are both entitled to be respected by each other for our different point of view, without necessarily having to agree with each other. Now, this is something to be taught, and this is something that schools must teach. So, influencing skills and conflict resolution skills. Fourth thing, citizenship. Taking care of commons. Understanding that a citizen is somebody who gets involved. A citizen is not a spectator. A citizen is somebody who gets involved, who resolves things. It's not someone who's a spectator and he makes a video about what is happening. In citizenship, teach the value of pluralism, the value of cross-cultural understanding and respect. Teach that everybody is entitled to whatever they believe in, and not only are they entitled to that, they are entitled to be respected as human beings, irrespective of the fact that they may believe what you believe and I believe, or they may believe different. It makes no difference. They are entitled to what they believe in, and we who believe differently must respect that. Citizenship also means understanding the rights of others, which means understanding where my privileges and liberties end. As the famous quote goes, your freedom ends where my nose begins. And I think that's very important for us to understand, to ensure that by our actions, by our speech, by our behavior, we are not violating somebody else's right, we are not violating somebody else's privacy. This must be taught in school. Number 5 is democracy. I don't necessarily mean parliamentary democracy. You might say, well, in my country, we don't have that kind of democracy and so on. I mean principle-based leadership, supporting people because of what they stand for, which is demonstrated by how they act. Now, whether you do that in a monarchy or do that in a democracy, as in a parliamentary democracy, you do that in any other kind of government, I don't care. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying democracy as in supporting a leader, not based on his caste, not based on his creed, his nationality, not based on his color or gender, but based on what he or she stands for, as demonstrated by their own actions. We're not talking about talking the big talk and walking something else. We're talking about walking the talk. Democracy. Then teach them about money, earning it and spending it. How does it work? What is good about this current system? What is bad about it? Teach them about handling money, which is savings, which is investments, which is ROI, return on investments, which is P&L, which is profit and loss accounts, which is budgeting of expenses. Importantly and most importantly, teach them about their own responsibility as people who have resources. And the importance of charity must come in when we teach about money. In terms of how we spend this money, money must not be seen as something, it's mine, I got it, I spend it where I want, how I want. No. It is mine, but I owe it to myself to be responsible about it and to spend it in a way which spreads goodness all around me. Pure self-indulgence is not something that money must be the means for me to do. Money is not meant for me just to purely indulge myself in every desire, in every in everything that I want. Money is something that I need to treat with respect, also and see it in terms of what good it can do for others who I share this planet with. Then we must teach in school about the environment, about the earth, about water, about the air, about forests, about wildlife, about rivers, about the oceans. Teach them in a way, as a matter of fact, all of this in a very practical, hands-on, experiential way. And finally, talk about food production. I'm saying specifically food production because today the issue is not a lack of resources, it is a problem with the distribution of these resources. It's not lack of wealth, it's a problem with the distribution of wealth. GDP, for example, is a very bad way of measuring the health of an economy because GDP goes up when there are disasters. GDP goes up when there are epidemics because hospitals are full and drugs are selling at record levels. GDP goes up when there are GDP goes up even if there is a huge disparity of wealth, if there is a huge disparity in terms of shared wealth, just because there are 2 or 3 or 4 high production, high profit industries, the GDP looks good, but if you go and walk on the streets, you see the actual face of abject poverty, where in the midst of that poverty, you will find Ivory Towers rising, on top of which the billionaires without a conscience they live. Now the point is that this is something which is hugely detrimental to society because no matter what we are going to say, at the end of the day, human beings matter. Every human being matters. The rich one matters and the poor one matters. Both of them matter. And if we are going to favor one at the expense of the other, whether we favor the rich at the expense of the poor or we favor the poor at the expense of the wealthy, overall society suffers. We have enough and more examples from our own history, from capitalism, the history of capitalism, the history of communism, and so on and so forth, to show how favoring one over the other never ever works. Today, we have a skewed mentality as far as creation of wealth is concerned. We look at creation of wealth purely as creating enhancing shareholder value. We don't see the creation of wealth as anything other than that, enhancing shareholder value. When we enhance shareholder value, effectively what are we saying? We are saying bring down the cost and increase productivity. Now, where do human beings fit in? They are cost. So therefore, remove the human element from production because the human element is cost. Now, given AI, given artificial intelligence, given more and more and more automation, we are finding that we are able to do this. Tesla, for example, the factory works in the dark. There is no need for lights because robots work in that factory. They don't need light. And therefore, you save on electrical consumption. Very good. The space required is much less because human beings have arms, they move around and so on and so forth. They need more space. Robots, you know exactly how much space a robot needs to work, and therefore the space is also less. Higher margins, therefore, greater shareholder value, therefore, but what happens to the people who are now out of a job because of artificial intelligence? So the point I'm making is that all of this sounds very sexy. It isn't. It's very, very dangerous. Now, I'm not against artificial intelligence. I'm the most hooked up guy as far as technology is concerned, believe me, but I also understand the limits of technology, and I understand how technology links up with those it is supposed to serve, which is you and me, human beings. Now, this is what schools must teach. This is what schools must teach, and the way to teach that, as I explained yesterday, through the project system, is where we give them a hands-on experiential way of understanding how life works. Schools are supposed to train and prepare those children for life. We need to show them how life works in the school itself. Teach them democracy by creating a students' council. Let me end with a real life case study which happened with me, which I did. In 1988 to 1991, as part of a job as the head of a very large rubber production establishment in the southernmost tip of India, I was in charge of 2 rubber estates, 3 factories, and one of the things that fell into my lap was a school. This school was part of the CSR activity of my company, and it was a school of 1,200 children and 75 teachers. And I was the head of that school. The principal of the school reported to me. I was what is called in our country the correspondent. So therefore, I was the boss of the school. Now, when I took over the school was losing money. It was a charitable school, so it wasn't losing money as such. But what was happening? It was losing children. Nobody wanted to come to the school because the standard was so bad. They were losing teachers because teachers didn't want to work in the school. The government used to pay part of the salaries. So the government didn't want to pay part of the salaries because of the children being fewer than what they were supposed to be. And so the school was really in a mess. The school was in a very poor area. That was the whole idea of building a school there, because it was supposed to be for the benefit of poor people. But the people didn't want to use it. The area also, interestingly, for want of a better word, was also plagued with alcoholism, with domestic violence, with all kinds of evils in that whole area. So these children also who came to the school, they came from disturbed homes, they came from broken homes. They didn't come from a very happy environment themselves. Now, when I took over the school, quite coincidentally, the first staff meeting I had was immediately after a interim exam, not the board exam, but the exam before that. And in that staff meeting, in the exam with the results, one entire class failed in English language. So I remember in that staff meeting, I asked the English teacher who was there, I said, well, how did you achieve this? Because in my view, this was an achievement. I mean, how do you make the whole class fail? I can understand if some people fail, some don't fail, but his entire class failed. So I said, how did you achieve that? The answer he gave me was so despicable, so horrible, that I grabbed onto my chair and I held it there and I said, I'm not going to get up. I took lots of deep breaths. He says to me, sir, these are lower caste people. That's all the brain they have. Now imagine, this is the teacher. Now, my point is, I'm not even going into the morality or moral aspect of this and saying all human beings are equal. And of course, I believe that, and I to the core of my being, I don't believe in any caste discrimination whatsoever. But my point, I'm not even going there. I'm just saying that what do you think is the fate of children whose teacher comes to the class thinking that here is a bunch of kids without any brains? Now imagine what kind of teacher is that, and what do you expect those children to learn? So anyway, to make a long story short, what I said to them was, I said, I'm going to turn around the school, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to form a students' council. So the teacher said, well, they said, what's that? I said, a students' council is a students' council. It's a council composed of students. And I said, you teachers are also entitled to elect representatives. 3 teachers will be represented on that council, except that they will be there as observers. They will not take part in the decision making. They said, how will the council be elected? I said, it will be elected. The students will elect their representatives. They said, what will this council do? I said, this council will run the school. Everything. They said, what is everything? I said, everything is everything. What time the school begins, the council will decide. How many holidays in a year, council will decide. Should be the duration of a period of a class, the council will decide. And so on and so forth. Whatever is related with the school, the council will decide. Again, to make a long story short, they were highly displeased. They didn't like the idea at all. But for their luck, they were landed with me. I paid their salaries. So I said to them, well, I don't think you have a choice. This is what I am saying to you, and this is what you will be doing. And you know what it means if you say that you will not do. So very reluctantly, they agreed. Then we called the students. Now don't imagine that the students welcomed this with open arms. They did. Their experience of adults was very negative. So therefore, these students were not very happy or not very open to listening to another adult telling them what must be done with their lives. But again, in this case, in their case, they had a choice. I mean, they could tell me to go. They could have told me to go to hell. They didn't. So I said to them, this is what I want to do. I want you to elect a council, and I want this council to run the school. They asked me the same questions. What does it mean? I told them it means this. So they said, if we decide that on a given day, that today we don't want to go to school, today is a holiday, can we do that? I said, of course. They said, if we come to school and we decide that there is this cricket match that we want to watch very desperately, last day of finals, and so we really don't want the next 2 classes. Is that okay? I said, yeah, that's fine. Absolutely no problem. I said, however, I have one condition that you also need to keep in mind and you need to fulfill. That's not negotiable. They said, what's that? I said, you need to complete the portion. Whatever you are supposed to study for the year, you need to be able to complete that. So I don't care, out of 225 days of school, if you want to do 100 days of school, I have got no problem, provided that you complete that course of study in 100 days. So they said, well, that means we may have to work longer hours. I said, yes. They said, well, that means that we may have to come on a Sunday or something, normal holiday, weekend, and study. I said, yep. So that gave them some pause. Meanwhile, there were 2 other things that used to happen in that school. One was corporal punishment. The basic principle I gathered, no one told me this, but from my observation, I gathered this basic principle, that teachers worked on the principle that if you can get your hands on a kid, beat him. Because whether he did anything at that time or not, he may have done something earlier which you didn't catch, so now you got him, beat him. Or he will in future obviously do something which needs a beating. You may not be there at the time to administer it, so when you catch him, beat him. Now this made those kids very fast on their feet. You couldn't touch a kid. He was gone before you could say Jack, before you could snap your fingers. Second thing which I saw in the school literally the day I walked in, it was a nice school, nice buildings. It had a 2-acre campus, but it was like walking onto a 2-acre garbage dump. There was plastic everywhere, paper everywhere, scrap and all kinds of banana peel and all sorts of stuff scattered all over the school. And the walls of the school were completely covered with graffiti. I didn't mention any of this to the student council. I just let it go. So when the school student council formed, as I said again reluctantly, then they started functioning. One day I called them and I said, I am going to run a competition. This is what competition? I said, I before that I did my homework. I made a map of the school grounds and I divided that into blocks and I allotted each block to a class. So I said, now this is my map and I'm allotting each block to one class. So this is grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5 and so on. And then I said that I am going to have a competition every quarter, once in 3 months, to see which block is the most beautiful. And I'm going to give a prize to that class. It was like magic. Overnight, that school ground got completely clean. And then, this was in the tip of India. If you look at the India like that, the bottom tip here, Kanyakumari district, very, very fertile land. If you leave your walking stick, it will sprout. These kids were from agricultural families. Overnight, the place turned into a garden. They're beautiful. They planted flowering plants and all sorts of stuff. The whole school got clean. I didn't have to spend a single paisa on this. They did it themselves. Then one day, I didn't have to say anything. One day they came to me, the student council came to me, they said, we have a request. I said, yes, what is that? They said, can you allow us to come on a Sunday? I said, sure, but what for? They said, we want to come and paint all these walls, whitewash them, so can you also give us some lime wash and permit us to come on a Sunday? This looks very bad. Now, I didn't tell them, but how come it looks bad? Who do you think did that? I didn't sort of rub their nose in it. I said, that's a great idea. How about this Sunday? They said, sure, we are ready. I said, I will also come and work with you. And so I got the lime wash and we spent the whole Sunday. I ordered some food and we painted the whole place and we had some food and everyone went home very happy. Complete transformation done by children from poor households, households which were plagued with domestic violence, with alcoholism, mainly the fathers, and all the rest of it. This is the case study. This is what I did myself. Now you might ask me, did you also try the project type of teaching that you talk about today? No, I didn't try that. That idea I didn't have at that time. This is something that came later. I've been thinking and writing and speaking about education for the last almost 30 years. But this is prior to that. So I didn't have that idea at that time, so I didn't do it. But today, if I run a school, that's exactly what I would do. Do this project wise. But even though we didn't do it project style, these children got an experience of being treated with dignity. They got an experience of decision making. They got an experience of running a school by themselves, and they got that experience. They got that experience hands-on. Now you might ask me, well, what about all these holidays and so on and so forth, which you gave the children? Guess what? They didn't take any of them. The school hours remained the same. The weekends remained the same. Everything remained the same. The only difference was, now this is what they were doing by choice, and so they came happily, they sat in the classes happily, and they did it happily. What about corporal punishment? Very simple. I said to the teachers, I said that corporal punishment from today is banned. I said, I don't care what the child does. If you touch a child, I said, I will ensure that you lose your job, and I will go and sit in the police station and I will ensure that an FIR is filed against you, and I will ensure that you go to prison or you get fined and you go to court. I said, that is my personal responsibility. I will make sure this happens to you. Make no mistake about that. If you touch a child, no matter what the child does, you will not touch a child. As simple as that. And it worked. It worked. And as I said, the final, for me, the proof of the pudding was that in a period of 2 years, this school, which was absolutely down in the dumps, came number 2 in the state, Tamil Nadu state science exhibition. These children, they created scientific experiments and they took them there and they exhibited and they spoke and so on and so forth. And all of this brought them, and they were competing against some very big time, fancy name schools of Tamil Nadu, including schools in Chennai and so on. But these kids got number 2. They came second place in that exhibition. I mean, I think that's something that has given me so much satisfaction then I think about that school and about those children and so on and so forth. I don't even know how many of them, where they are now and so on. I haven't gone there for over 20 years now. But I think it is something that is so beautiful it remains with me. And this is a case study that I have quoted in country after country to show that if you want citizens who will behave responsibly, give responsibility to children in school. If you want citizens who are good for the environment, give them that environment in the school. If you want citizens who are kind and compassionate and honest and who have integrity, then teach them all that in the school, hands-on. If you want citizens who are responsible, who take care of commons, who are responsible for each other and to each other, give them that experience in the school. This is what schooling must do, not fill the heads of children with random bits of information which make no sense to them, not fill them with bits of information without teaching them how it works, how it all comes together, how it's related to each other, and how it has practical value. No, that's not education. That's garbage. That is what we have created for our benefit. As I said yesterday, in the current schooling system, everybody benefits except the child. But if you ask somebody who's the school for, they will not say it's for the teachers, it's for the school owners, it's for the school staff, it's for the parents. No, they'll say the school is for the children. My submission to you is, if the school is for the children, how is it that the only entity who does not benefit from schooling is the child? Everybody else benefits. The whole class can fail. The teacher will go home with the same salary. It makes no difference to the teacher. The child can fail. The child's future is locked. Children commit suicide because of this completely nonsensical examination system. The teacher goes home with a full pay packet. The school owner goes home and goes laughing all the way to the bank with the profit that he has made for the year, even though those children have failed, even though their lives have been ruined. And don't tell me it's not everybody. I don't care even if it is one child whose life was ruined because of this lousy education system. This education system needs to be shut down. We need to shut it down. We need to replace it with an education system that actually works, which creates citizens that we can be comfortable with, that we can be happy about, and we can be proud that we as teachers are the people who have enabled this to happen. My brothers, my friends, if society is sick, we are the people who are responsible for making it sick, or if not that, then for not curing it. Society is sick because the schooling system is sick. The schooling system has been sick for a very long time, for at least 100 years, if not more. We need to cure it and we need to get rid of this sickness. I hope you are with me in this. All power to you. Please go back, think about this, change this system. Final test. How many of you have in a school, how many of you have parent-teacher associations? Show of hands. How many people have parent-teacher associations? My question to you is, why do you have a parent-teacher association in a school which is meant for the child? Where is the child in this? A parent-teacher association is an association of jailers to take decisions about the people who are incarcerated in that prison which is called a school. It is utterly shameful. A parent-teacher association, what do you mean a parent-teacher? You must have a student association in which parents and teachers also contribute. These are all signs to show, these are the diagnostic signs to show where the sickness lies. And the sickness lies with us parents and with us teachers and with us school owners. Get out of this sickness. Focus on the children because they are our future. Focus on them. Do what is good for them. Don't do what is good for you. And believe me, the good news is, if you do what is good for them, it will also be good for you. I am not suggesting to you something which will destroy your lives. I am suggesting you something which will give you joy to go to the school every day, and the children, it will give them a joy to come to your class every day. You will learn and they will learn from you, and much more importantly, you will learn from them. All power to you. Thank you very much for watching.